Hello and welcome to Practical Inclusion. I'd like to start today by acknowledging the Wadawurrung people and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And a really big shout out to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are watching in today, either live or on the replay. I understand that the voice referendum rhetoric is growing and growing louder and louder, and any ways that I can support the conversations that are occurring and be the best ally I can be. I'm doing whatever I can to make that happen, learning and listening to as many of your voices as possible, and really appreciating the labour that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are putting into sharing their opinions, sharing their stories and the circumstances around this vote, because it's significant, and the education that so many of you are doing is so invaluable, but also I understand the toll that takes. So thank you for taking some time to listen in today. I've got a really special guest today who has just reminded me that they are a social worker. I have a science background, so this is going to be a fantastic combination, blending our two approaches to very similar issues around inclusion and diversity and how we create safe, inclusive spaces. So I don't want to talk anymore. I want to hand straight over to hear from our guest about their story in their words, and also maybe to acknowledge the country that you're on as well.
Absolutely, no problem. Thank you so much, Bree. So yeah, I'm Lorene Slade. You can call me Ren. My pronouns are they and them, so genderqueer, bisexual human. I'm currently today on Wurundjeri Boonwurrung country here in Naarm, but that's because I'm on holiday and love to do things like this on a holiday too. And usually I'm on Yorta Yorta country in Kanikookna, Shepparton, is where I've grown up and and where I work again now. So that's who I am. So yeah, I'm a social worker and have been for around about 12 years or so now. And yeah, working in my own private practice part-time, Slade Consulting. So yeah, within that private practice doing counselling services as well as consulting, education and clinical supervision for and about and to inform the LGBTIQA plus community and trauma survivors as well. So yeah, that's who I am.
That's beautiful. Thanks for introducing yourself, Ren. And we're two genderqueer bisexuals, which is not something I think that would happen very often on one of these LinkedIn live shows.
Yes, absolutely. We're rare, but I mean, there's a few of us, but yeah, getting us in the same Zoom link up is a hard thing.
Maybe just to start us off, a lot of people in the workshops that I run ask what genderqueer is. It's not a term that they're familiar with. Are you happy to give us a little insight as to what it means to you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I think, quite often in the sessions that I run along these lines, I very often start it is so subjective. And I think for me, it's the recognition as an AMAB assigned male at birth human that, so much of my experience, so much, as a kid, as an adolescent, as, today has been, I suppose when I was buying into and not understanding that there was more than just the male and female options available to me, it was trying to fit into that male box and going, I don't fit in here. This isn't me. But there's little parts of me that does fit in there as well. I'm seeing this female box over here. There's parts of that I fit into, but not completely as well. And there's all this space in between that I exist in as well. So, I often joke and say, when I see the small sport of genders, I take them all. Being able to express that and relish in that, that for me is, something I've been in the last few years been able to, be much more prideful and much more affirming of myself in that space as well. So that's been liberating. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And I really like the way you framed that because, that some of the questions that you get from people is they really want to narrow down what all of these terms mean and get quite specific. What does it mean? And you can see them taking notes, wanting to understand what that term means. But genderqueer to you and to me mean very different things, perhaps. And the way you've described it is not necessarily my experience. And I think that's just, there's so much value in understanding that, right? That we use words that make sense to us in ways that it makes sense to us. And what we need other people to understand is just to respect the way that we experience gender and the world. Is that, do you find that kind of thing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the context dependence of that as well is incredibly important. That of course, on a session like this, it's very much a part of it. But yeah, knowing when it is I suppose a little intrusive, and it's being able to and fleshing a lot of this out in a lot of the education and one-on-one consultations that I do, of being able to flesh out when it's the curiosity that's kicking in, and whether it's a more recognizing that we all have biases. We all come from a place of having a bias, having some level of racism, queerphobia, ableism, etc. But it's how that takes on, and sometimes that will come in the form of a fetishization sort of thing of, oh, what's this new exotic thing that you proclaim that you are, and that sort of thing. And being able to sift through what the motivation is around asking those questions and understanding why it is that we all ask these questions. And I want to, I suppose, make very clear there that I'm including us in this discussion as well. That it's never an us and them sort of thing. It's not an allies versus queers sort of thing, because I'm almost certain that you'd be in a similar boat, Bree, that, quite often, I was going to say some of the worst, but that's a bit reductive, but some of the most blindsided sort of queerphobia can come from within queer communities, right? When, it's our own internalized queerphobia, or, if it's, quite often I will say that I'm an ally to gay men because I'm neither gay nor a man. So, on that level, I'm in that allyship space. However, of course, it's never that simple, right? That, there's always crossovers of experience. Anyway, here's me going down a rabbit hole, but, being able to, being able to interrogate, being able to sit with, free of judgment as much as possible, free of self-judgment as much as possible, what it is that's helping us go down that path of curiosity or fetishization, or sometimes more, a disgust sort of route of, and that could be, coming from a place of growing up in certain religions with certain, backgrounds and so forth. These sorts of things, helping to sift through that can be, I think, a really, really important thing. And when we can understand what it is that, what biases come up for us in certain circumstances, that, someone's bias around, for example, lesbian women might be different to a genderqueer human, or, someone with a disability and that sort of thing. There may be biases all around, but it depends on the different sort and where those biases have come from in our early childhood experiences, through adolescence, that sort of thing. What society tells us we should, think and feel about certain people is so pervasive, and it's something that we can't escape from, but we can attempt to neutralize as well. So, yeah.
Wow, I've learnt so much from there, and I feel like I need to go. Just a week or two ago, we released a blog around respectful curiosity, and I feel like I need to totally rewrite that now, because that bit that you were describing there about really understanding the motivation for your curiosity is probably a piece we missed in that blog. I'll have to go back and read it now, but as you describe it, I go, yeah, that is actually so important. To understand. We talk a lot about this respectful curiosity in the D&I spaces at the moment. What does that look like to you? How can somebody who's got a colleague or perhaps a community member or family member who is queer and they really want to be the best ally and create better spaces and perhaps understand what barriers that person is facing, how do they demonstrate that respectful curiosity?
Amazing question. And look, it's one of these moments where I want to, and so many people want, a very simple start here, step 2, step 3, step 4. And look, I think so much of it depends on the individual on so many levels. I think, taking an example of, a staff member coming out at work, as, let's say a trans woman coming out at work, being able to, first of all, so there's a few different balances to get right in all this, is taking moments of reflection, being able to go, okay, what is it? How have I been coded to think about trans women in my experiences? And we can think of many vile examples, which I'm definitely not going to detail, but, movies like Ace Ventura and all this sort of thing and I'm possibly showing, my age here, that, these would be for me growing up. And this helped to code the way that trans women have been seen in society. And, we see so many other examples, and it might also depend on your cultural background, your class background, your religious background, all these sorts of things, that it's important to not take that two-dimensional approach to, because I am a baby boomer, that means that I will have this certain attitude towards trans people. It's never, ever that simple. And I think, getting that balance right of taking that moment to reflect on yourself and, how you see trans people and how you show those biases as well, because you will show them, at least in subtle ways. Everyone does. And the more we try and escape from that, the more it comes out in much more, I suppose, pervasive sort of ways and more subtle sort of ways. When we can admit that, when we can acknowledge that, we've got the foundations of liberation from, where we go from that. On the other hand, we also want to absolutely make sure that in this hypothetical situation, this trans woman's voice is heard. In that, using curiosity, being with that trans woman and going, okay, so, like you asked before, what does that mean to you? Because again, there are so many ways of being a human, let alone at the intersections of our identities. Being able to, be curious about, okay, what does that mean for you? And coming down to your job as well. Are you the D&I specialist? Are you a manager? Are you the human resources manager? So forth. Knowing what your role is and asking questions that follow from that. And, the trans broken arm syndrome comes to mind here, where a trans person comes into hospital because they've broken their arm, and suddenly they're getting all these questions about their genitals. And it's irrelevant, completely irrelevant to their broken arm, yet they're the questions that are being asked. So knowing the questions you need to ask and why you need to ask them. I think the one other balancing act, and there's possibly some other balancing acts in all this, is the balance between doing your own research and asking for that person to inform you on who they are, what's going on for them as well. Getting that balance right can be incredibly important. And again, I'd love to say there was a science to it, but and maybe there is, and this is maybe where you come in, Brett. Yeah, from my experience, it's much more about art and recognizing that you will get it wrong. I get it wrong. I misgender myself sometimes, and that's that's a fun game. But it's being able to recognize that yes, you'll get it wrong, and when you get it wrong, you apologize and you move on and correct yourself in that process, and knowing that you'll continue to get it wrong as well. And yeah, that may hurt that person, and that's quite unfortunate and regrettable. However, when when we go down a path of beating ourselves up, which again, something I do as well, we sometimes lose a learning opportunity in that, because we end up in this guilt spiral and not necessarily going, I wonder what it is that means that I keep tripping up in this way or in that certain situation. What was it that made me trip up? I didn't get much sleep last night. Okay, that's probably the reason why, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that you've covered off what are some of the typical things that people say, i.e., check your bias, knowing what to ask and why, and do your own research. But you've just provided such depth to that in terms of how, as humans, we can do that. But as you say, it's not a science, it's not a checklist. There is an art to this, to read the room, right?
Yes.
To know what types of things will work. We had a great comment come in from Annika, I think, and apologies if I've pronounced your name wrong. I can always tell if someone is approaching a conversation with genuine kindness and curiosity, but I'd always start with, are you comfortable with me asking a question about it? Would you also say that that's a good approach?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, look, it's often said that a lot of queer people, and I suppose a lot of people at many intersections of identity, have a pretty good BS radar, and that intent is often felt. But yet, checking in and going, look, this could be a potentially invasive question. I hope you don't mind me asking. And ask the question, and be prepared to be wrong in that, and go, that is invasive, or whatever it might be, can be incredibly important. And again, I think one thing that doesn't get said enough in that as well is that it gives the opportunity for both of you, assuming that this is a didactic conversation, that both of you have that opportunity to learn more about yourself and the world through that conversation of going, for that, again, going back to the hypothetical trans woman, that she will have that opportunity to then go, no, I don't feel comfortable. And particularly for a lot of marginalised humans in general, being able to be assertive, and have basic needs met and boundaries upheld can be a difficult thing, for many number of reasons, many of which we're familiar with. Having that opportunity and that space to do that can be liberating and beautiful and amazing, and can also help the person asking the question to go, this is a boundary. And it can be good, depending again on the relationship and the intentions, to go, I just want to check in. What was about that question that was invasive for you? Can be a good follow-up question to learn from that as well. It can be really, really good to do. And one other thing too that I've been, upon personal and community reflections as well, I definitely don't encourage deliberately stuffing up, but when we stuff up and then correct ourselves, and then eventually, hopefully soon, get to a point of not misgendering or misnaming or whatever it might be, that can give so much hope, and hope for a lot of LGBTIQA plus people to know that, people who are straight or cis, assuming that that's the case, will have genuine and a will and a want to do right, and that it can show you're worth it. I see you, I hear you, and I want to do right by you, and I'm going to do the work for you. I think can be, quite heartwarming. On the very positive side of it, of course, there's some negative sides to it as well, which most of us know, and I definitely don't want to discount that. But I think we need to bring that into the conversation as well.
I couldn't agree more. I think just and that's almost what we need to do ourselves, and for all the allies watching in, is that being prepared to get it wrong and being comfortable to sit in that space. I love how you said don't go into the guilt cycle, because that's what creates those behaviours where we defend ourselves and then we cause way more harm than what our initial mistake would have made if we had have just listened and reflected, corrected ourselves, moved on, as you say.
Absolutely. And at the risk of going full meta here, I know that I've broken one of the many rules of social work is don't tell people not to do something, because we're going to do it then. But I think too, if inevitably you do go into the guilt cycle, to add another level to this, is turn that critically reflective lens back on that as well, of going, oh, I'm guilt cycling here. What purpose is this serving for me? Why am I doing this? Very often it will be coming from, of course, it's almost always coming from a good place, right? Where we're wanting to, and it's about, checking that motivation. Are you wanting to get the rainbow star of going, I am a queer inclusive human? And don't get me wrong, we get to those points, we want to be able to put ourselves forward as a safe person and that sort of thing. And to that, I'd challenge, no one can be 100% safe as well. Is this coming from a place of, I want to do right by my employees, my staff, the people that I'm working with, the clients I'm working with, whatever it might be? Or is it something else? Does it come from a more personal base of queer people in your family or friendship groups or whatever it might be? The answers are usually all of the above in some amount, right? And then going, okay, so what is it about that that's important to me? What does that say about my values, what I stand for, who I am, that sort of thing? And and so forth. I'll pause there because I know I get to a rambly point sometimes.
Not at all, not at all. It's fascinating and really helping me put some context to some of these concepts and ideas that we know to be true. But I really appreciate the way you have gone deep into those topics to get us to be able to be in that space where we can be stronger allies, or the allies that people need of us, and that we can also have that self-compassion, to understand, as you mentioned earlier, that what has preconditioned us to perhaps make some of these mistakes, or to perhaps ask some of these questions, or want to know the answers to some of these things. I like that framing of it. That's really cool. I'm conscious that we're kind of getting close to time, and I wanted to give you some space to talk a little bit about the type of work that you're doing in your consulting, because I see some fascinating workshops that I think the listeners might be interested in.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I provide I suppose everything from the 101s of how to work with LGBTIQA plus people in health and human service settings. So I tend to focus more on those sorts of settings, being a social worker and working in those sorts of settings in my background, educating people in those spaces as well. All the way up to I think probably one of my passion projects and one of the workshops I'm most proud of in my work is called Neutralising Queerphobia. And it's an attempt to create that, that safe and uncomfortable space to talk about our biases, what they do to us, how they affect us, what they do to the people around us as well. And being able to, and I was very careful about the wording of that workshop and therefore the philosophy of that workshop, and going through a lot of texts around anti-racist work has been some of the most helpful in putting together that work, because I would love to see more work along the lines of Robin DiAngelo and Layla Saad in queer spaces as well. There's certainly been a few notable ones in there, but seeing some workbooks and that sort of stuff is something I would love to see. But taking that sort of approach of, yes, it's important, incredibly important to do the work, and it is incumbent on people who don't share those identities to do that work, but also being able to do that from a comfortably challenging sort of space, not too comfortable that it's seen as something that's not important, but also not so tense that you go, oh my God, if I don't do this, I'm an awful person and I'm going to make people die, or whatever spiral we end up going down, right? Getting that balance right is incredibly important. So I thought the term neutralising, I felt, encapsulated that well. It's not about eliminating queerphobia. I mean, look, please, can we? But, unrealistic at this point, right? Neutralising is something that's much more achievable for all of us. It recognises that we make mistakes and we can move on from that and recover and repair and rebuild from those mistakes. So those workshops I adore doing, and did done a couple of those sessions already in Wangaratta and in Canigutna Shepparton as part of the Out in the Open Festival last year as well. I also do one-on-one consults with D&I professionals and whatnot as well, particularly in the health and human service space, knowing that area myself. And I really enjoy my clients in that space as well, because it's that opportunity to, explore the much more individual parts that can get in the way, and also the strengths as well. And I know we may not have time to delve into this, but recognizing what you do well in this space. I know I'm very lucky and fortunate in this space, particularly working in this space, that I'm, I suppose, more adept than the average person at adapting my language and changing my language, which, in queer spaces is incredibly important. So many language changes through my 12 years in the field. And I can rely on that strength. But some of the administrative sides of things, if I was asked to, change a form, then, I'd be calling in some help on that, because, that sort of thing is, not so much my strength. So being able to draw on individual strengths, to sometimes fill the gaps, to have a launching point, and so forth, can be something I really love in those one-on-one consults as well. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Excellent. And people can find you on Instagram and LinkedIn, I believe?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Lorene_listens on Instagram, because why not alliterate? And as partly a social worker, that goes well. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, sladeconsulting.services. Website design is also not a strength of mine, so apologies in advance. Always happy and keen to be in touch with people, hear thoughts, help solve some problems too.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and really providing this education that you have. It's really appreciated. And to all the listeners, make sure you jump on the LinkedIn post and provide us some questions and comments as you're watching this, potentially on the replay. We've just finished watching it live. For those who want to keep updated with these LinkedIn Lives, we're not doing them every week this year. I've kind of recognises my boundaries and limits. So we're going to spread them out a little bit more. But if you want to jump to the website breegorman.com.au, you can join the newsletter and you'll always get notified of the video of the one that we've done recently. This one will obviously feature in the next newsletter, so you can make sure that you don't miss them, considering we won't be going every week. Just a reminder, if you didn't watch last ones with Femily, Silicon Valley's gender equity expert, go and check that one out. She had some really excellent things for us to learn in that one as well. And I think that's it from me this time. So thanks a lot, Ren, for sharing your story and your insights. And I really look forward to learning more from you, from your social media platforms, and also hopefully getting along to one of your workshops some day in the future. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.